Nutrition Hero Podcast. Igniting both the art and the science of functional medicine. Here's your host, Dr. Brad Watts.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Nutrition Hero Podcast. Dr. Brad Watts here with you once again in the podcast lab. Glad to be here today. Glad to be here. So I hope this podcast finds you well, your family healthy, and everything going your way. And I gotta say, I also hope this is the last COVID-19 podcast you're ever going to listen to from the Nutrition Hero side of the podcast internet. And I'm a making lemonade out of lemons kind of guy. And so today is going to be a discussion on some of the pivots, some of the adaptations that we've been making, and providers all over the planet have been making, and some things that are exciting, things that I think you'll probably want to keep around even after your travel ban has lifted, even after you've been given the all clear to get out and go hang out at the gym or wherever it is that you spend your time. And so we're going to go through that today. So there are, on the front end of this conversation, there are obviously a lot of people that you could throw under the bus. A lot of people. And the bus would have to be huge right now to make sure that all the people that deserve to get thrown under the bus fit. And so today, instead of going through all of that, maybe we'll reserve that for another episode after the rest of the dust settles here. But I'm excited to be bringing you some positive information, some information that you can get excited about for rebuilding, not just your practice, but your future. Rebuilding the future of how you are basically designing your life. And I hope that's what happens here. I hope everybody takes an opportunity to redesign their life. Redesign what it is that's important to them. Sit down and make sure that you're building around it. It gives you this pause that everybody's been on. Gives you an opportunity to rethink what's important, to rethink. So as we do that today, one of the things I want to share with you is what I've been up to over the last 3 years, and it's what many more clinicians are jumping on board with over the last 2 months. It's called telehealth. Telehealth is that great frontier right now that hasn't really been explored by most clinicians, and there are ways to do things well. There are tips and tricks, setting up your office the right way, to skills when it comes to communicating over the internet. That will be very helpful for you, right? And we're going to go through those today. And I want to just give them to you so you don't have to sit there and struggle for a couple of months waiting to learn these lessons on your own. So anyway, we're going to go through that today. Before we get started, though, thank you to everybody, all of the new listeners. Thank you for subscribing on iTunes or Stitcher, however you get your podcast media. Thank you as well for those of you that are on YouTube for the thumbs up and the subscribes. We appreciate that. We appreciate the participation and all of the emails that you guys send. It's awesome to hear what you're doing and the things you're excited about. So anyway, thank you for supporting the Nutrition Hero Podcast. So if we're going to go through the list, then obviously we're going to start with number one. The most important thing as a healthcare provider, in my opinion, the most important thing is that your patients choose themselves. In moments of extreme clarity, that they are saying yes to health, to life, an abundance of vitality. Like they're choosing their future over their comfort. This is so important. This is so important. I think I may have done a podcast in the past here about comfort and how when you consistently choose comfort, you're always going to end up with chronic disease. Right? That's really a tough way to go, but try it, right? Eat whatever you feel like, whatever you enjoy. Sit on the couch as long as you feel like it, however long you enjoy. And at some point, you're going to develop chronic disease. And so what we want patients to be able to do is we want them to be able to choose a healthy future over a comfortable now. That's super important. So that's the goal. All of this telehealth stuff, that's still got to be the goal. Patient progress. Results. Any provider is only as good as the last results, right? And that's something that is completely on the down low. Nobody wants to talk about that. But that's reality. You're only as good as your last result. And, and it's weird because in healthcare, typically, you're only as good or you're only as smart as what you can profess, right? You only are as good as the degree behind your name. And I still think that's a little bit of bull. It is. You're only as good as your last result. I don't care what you know. If nobody understands you, you're not helping anybody. And that's a key. That's a key. So I want you to write this stuff down. So that's number one. Patients got to choose themselves. They have to. Without that, we failed. Without that, we failed. Now, your job is to make sure that you don't sabotage their ability to choose health and healing by giving them unhelpful anchors to focus on. What's an unhelpful anchor? Right now, imagine having Fox News or CNN in the background over your shoulder as you're trying to communicate to somebody regarding their health care. Right? You would never do that because you know that they're not listening to a word you're saying. They're watching the fear and the freak out montage that's happening on TV. Right? So you don't want to sabotage their ability to choose health and healing by giving them something unhelpful to focus on. In the same way, there are 1,000 ways on a much smaller level that you're doing it on a daily basis. And it could be the length of your beard, right? I'm not joking. If somebody's sitting in front of me and we're talking about their health situation and all they can think about is that weird gray hair on my chin, right? Like, that's a problem. That means that my beard just came between that person and their ability to heal. I don't want that. I don't want that on me. Can't have that, right? We can't have that. So there are 1,000 little things vying for their attention all the time. And this new platform of communication, doing telehealth, whether you're using Zoom calls or you have a private line, whatever it might be, this new platform creates 1,000 distractions that were never there before. And it's up to you to find out what those distractions are so you can minimize them on the front end. And that's what this podcast is going to be about today. So this is important, right? So anyway, a new platform is oftentimes a scary thing for patients. It can be, right? Especially if you got somebody that they're like, what's this cell phone thing? I don't know how this works. What's an app? How does Zoom work? Right? And they're like, all you see is the underside of their nose when you're talking to them because they don't know where the cameras are and all this stuff. And like, there are a lot of things to sort out. So your patient has their attention going in all of these different directions with the new platform, maybe a new provider, maybe you're new to them. They're trying to figure out, is this person smart? Right? Is this person helpful? Can I understand what they're saying? Are they a good leader? Do I trust them? Right. Your patients have been living in lockdown at this point for a month, and it's a new world they've been living in. So anyway, the goal for a telehealth visit or interaction is to focus on the patient. Both of you. You can focus on the patient, and that's because that's your job. You've been trained to do that. But so many times when people have chronic disease, they're trying to get their focus on anything but themselves. Anything. Distract me is like the call of a chronic disease patient. Distract me. Get my mind off of what my issue is. And so the goal in telehealth visit is to be able to focus on the patient, both of you, right? So you, the provider, and them, the patient. You both have to be zeroed in. They can't focus on themselves when you're giving them 99 reasons to get distracted, like your terrible polo shirt, right? Or like the news station going on behind you, as I mentioned. Or your cat's climbing on a shelf behind your head, whatever it might be, right? We want to make sure that you set yourself up for success from the beginning. So I've broken this down into a few different sections, and this is the list. I actually want you to write these things down. So set it up right from the beginning, and instead of swinging and missing and people staying sick for a few months, you have an opportunity to take large steps in the right direction by increasing your professional skills as a telehealth provider. That's you. Right now, here's what's cool though, is at some point even when we're out of the lockdown situation, this may be a service avenue that you continue. You get your own time. You get to do it from anywhere. It doesn't have to be from the lockdown of your own home. It could be in your office, right? Streamlines patient productivity. If they live outstate from you, not out of state, but outstate, like out in the country, they don't necessarily have to drive into the city to see you. Okay? Not when you have the ability to connect with them via telehealth. So super important. Additionally, you got to charge what you're worth for these visits. You got to charge what you're worth. So I'll leave that up to you. But for the most part, healthcare providers, man, undercharging for telehealth. To the list. So let's get to the list here. All right. So this is organized in sections. Section number 1 is called technical layout. Technical layout. You actually have to have some technical skills to be able to pull this off the right way and to be able to deliver quality service to a patient through telehealth platform. Now, telehealth platform is just that. You have the opportunity to get something like Get Healthy or OptiMantra or some service that allows you to take notes and communicate with your patients through a portal-based system like a hospital does. Those are out there for you. They're very inexpensive. Very inexpensive. Very effective. You can use those, right? Some of you are going to opt for Zoom. Some of you will do FaceTime calls for your patients that have iPhones, etc. It's up to you. But whatever it is, make sure that you get a digital note-taking system that works. That works. Even if you used, an encrypted email software, something that's HIPAA compliant, and you're keeping notes that way. Whatever you got to do it. But just make sure that you're following the HIPAA rules so that if you ever get audited or otherwise for this stuff, you are bulletproof. You want to make sure that everything is locked up. All right? Everything is locked up tightly. So no personal health information getting out anywhere. Additionally, when we look at this list of the technical layout, you want to make sure that you stage your recording space. If I'm going to be doing telehealth visits from an office, I'm going to make sure it's the same office every single time that patient speaks to me, that they get the same background every single time. Right? If you have pictures behind you or over your shoulders, make sure that they're in the same spot every single time. The reason this is important is you want to create some level of predictability for the patient so that they're not trying to figure out, are you in a new space? Are you at home? Are you in the bathroom at home? What in the world are you taking a visit from your laptop in the bathroom for, doctor? Right? You want to make sure that your office space is laid out. You want to set it like a stage, because that's what it is. The same way that you would stage your office for your opening day, stage your office for your opening recording session, okay, or your opening telehealth session. You got to stage it. Predictability is key here. Predictability and consistency will win the day when it comes to telehealth. You're not hand-to-hand shaking a patient's hand, right? You're not face-to-face shaking a patient's hand, excuse me. And so you don't have the ability to overcome some of your quirks and overcome some of the patient's curiosity, right? And maybe doubtfulness even. You don't have the ability to overcome that necessarily when you're communicating through a computer screen. And so it's very important to create an environment that they can look forward to and know that you are consistently who you are. Like, you're consistently who you say you are, right? Because you're consistently being where you say you are, and you're consistently the person on the other side of the camera. So hopefully that makes sense, right? Consistency wins the day here. So stage your recording space. On that note, do not sit in front of a window. Do not have a spotlight of light shining on you with a dark background. You got to have some, like a wall behind you, something to anchor the patient's attention so they know you're in your office, right? Make sure that you have indirect lighting, enough of it, that it lights up the whole room. If you have direct lighting or like a stage light that you got off of Amazon, like I have probably 5 or 6 of them here. 5 exactly. If you have lights that you got off of Amazon, you have to be able to know how to set them up for an advantageous recording. Google it. Right? There'll be YouTube videos on how to set up stage lights. Easy, right? And it's something that's worth knowing. It's worth having a skill for. If you're going to be in a dim lit room, you're going to have these stage lights for that. If you're in a room that has a bunch of windows, that's great. That can work. Just don't sit in the sun, right? So making sure that that indirect lighting is high enough, bright enough, that it doesn't wash you out on camera. Now, if you additionally are looking at a studio space in your house or your office, whatever it might be, make sure that the walls are painted a nice color. It's something neutral. You don't want to be in front of your grandma's wallpaper in your bathroom or whatever it might be while you're doing these recordings. So that's not where it's at. Right? Not where it's at. So I know some of these things, when they talk about them, they sound very elementary, but you'd be surprised. I've been able to be fortunate enough to record with providers all over the country for this podcast, for other projects I've been working on, etc. And you'd be surprised at some of the backgrounds these people use, and it's shocking. It's shocking. So set your professionalism, right? Get that thing organized the right way. Indirect lighting is key. Speaking of which, if you're a provider that wears a shirt and tie all the time, it's too much when you're at home or when you're in your office. It's too much. Shirt and tie. Wear a tie and a jacket. That would be more appropriate. Okay, a tie and a jacket. A button-down shirt with no tie is too little in my opinion, right? But a jacket and a shirt is where it's at for these type of visits. So you want to be casual enough that the patient's not like, what is wrong with this guy? And you want to be dressed up enough that the patient doesn't go, hey, I'm dressed better than that person, right? So you got to make sure that you're doing what you need to, but in my opinion, a shirt and a jacket, it's just right. Now, additionally, when it comes to the technical layout of things, camera angle is key. If you're using your laptop with the camera on your laptop, want to make sure that you set that camera angle so that it's slightly above eye level. Now, it's not necessarily an awesome setup if you're going to be typing while you're talking, okay? But it is effective, very effective. So you want to make sure that your camera is slightly above eye level. And the reason is you want to elevate your patient. When the patient is looking at the underside of your nose or the underside of your chin, or looking at what's in your teeth because they're looking up at you from your camera on your laptop, that creates too many scenarios where your patient gets distracted. The focus is no longer on their health. You want to elevate your patient. Elevate them. Now, I know there's a lot of teaching in healthcare and practice management and etc. where the doctor needs to be elevated and all this stuff. The doctor, come on. Elevate the patient. Right? Elevate the patient. You are elevated by who you are. You don't have to put the patient on a lower level to have power and all this stuff. Come on. Let's get organized here. All right? Let's make sure that you're elevating your patients. You're putting the patient on a pedestal, understanding that it's about honor. You're honoring the patient. It goes a long way. Honor is key. So camera angle has got to be slightly above eye level, and you want to make sure that stays that way consistently. So if you have to get a stack of books, count out how many books it takes to put your laptop on to keep that thing at slightly above eye level. Might be 5, might be 10, but make sure you write it down so that it's consistent every single time you're doing your telehealth visit. Okay, so super cool. Super cool. All right, so from a technical perspective, those are absolute keys. Lighting, camera angle, what you're wearing, and what your recording space looks like, or your telehealth space looks like. I keep saying recording because I'm sitting in this podcast lab right now. All right, but you got to make sure that it's buttoned up and appropriate, and somebody that you would be comfortable letting your own mother seek healthcare advice from a provider that looks like you do on the other side of the screen. All right, super key. Super key. Additionally, want to make sure that if you have an opportunity to do so, get a hardwire Ethernet. Run a cable from your modem or wherever your internet comes into your house. Even if you have to get an 80-foot cable, get that happening, right? Your office, typically they'll have an Ethernet cable port and a wall in an office. Use it, The last thing you want is to be explaining something that you find awesome and intriguing and could potentially help this patient turn around their healthcare trajectory, and then for the internet to cut out. Ethernet's the way to go. And so get a gold-plated Ethernet cord. Best Buy has them, Amazon has them, and you can get them in huge lengths. I have one here that I'm connected to that is probably 60 feet, and it runs all the way across this entire space into where the internet comes into the my podcast lab here. So super important, right? Into the office. Super important. So get the technical stuff organized. Make sure you practice on your friends first. Kind of like when you first did an adjustment on somebody, you practice on your friends. I know you did. I know you did. And you want to make sure that you're practicing on your friends here as well. So practice how to set up, how to turn on, how to mute, how to unmute, how to basically, one of the things you're going to find out with the communication skills, which is the next section, is the pace of conversation is important, because there's oftentimes a delay when you're using internet versus cell phone communication. Very important. Now, having said that, if your laptop is older than 2015, please use your smartphone on a tripod to do your telehealth visits. Okay? Your smartphone will have a camera that is at least twice as good as your laptop if it's from previous to 2015. Smartphone's where it's at. All right. Most of the time I do recording, when it comes to Zoom or otherwise, it is going to be from a smartphone platform. And here's why, is if the internet does go out, right, and I'm not by my Ethernet cable situation here, if the internet does go out, I have data as a backup. And so it's a smooth, seamless transition for that recording device. So very, very cool. Plus, the camera situation on a tripod is much more maneuverable, and I can take notes on my computer while I'm still looking the patient in the eye. And so super cool there. Anyway, check it out. We got these little mini tripods on Amazon. You can get tripods that are 8 inches off the table, or you can get a big dog tripod like you're out taking nature photos and set it up on the other side of your desk. That's fine too. But you want to make sure that you have it organized in a way that is consistently above average when it comes to your technical skills. Now, when it comes to communication, this is another aspect of telehealth that people are going to experience but not necessarily predict right now. You're going to experience before you're aware of it. And that's this one-way audio traffic. So oftentimes in communication platforms, one person will talk, and if I'm talking, it's going to cancel out whatever you say because I started talking first. Sometimes it takes whoever's loudest, right? And it's a one-way audio channel. It's not like a cell phone where if you and I are talking on a cell phone and we both say something at the same time, I can say it and I can still hear you say it. When it comes to telehealth, oftentimes whoever's talking first is going to basically take precedence from that platform, that app. The app chooses who it's going to listen to, and that's important. So the pace of your conversation is important. The pace of your conversation. So if we're talking this fast and we're going through a telehealth visit and all of a sudden you have a question and I keep going rambling on, there's no way that we're going to be able to stop and communicate appropriately. So you want to make sure that your pacing is something that is a pace that people can listen to without getting bored out of their skull, like you might be listening to this podcast right now. But you also want to make sure that it's not so fast that it sounds like digital noise. Digital noise. So this is cool. All right. Additionally, when we talk about one-way audio traffic and the pace of conversation, that definitely leads into your language skills. On a telehealth visit, you want to make sure that you are more of a TV host than a radio personality. A radio personality usually will have sayings and use language that is local, if that makes sense. Like in Minnesota, because everybody knows the Minnesota accent, right? Well, if I start talking with a Minnesota accent, which I usually don't, it comes across as very casual. Now, I notice this when I talk with providers all over the country, interview them for the podcast, etc. I notice this very drastically. You want to make sure you finish your words. Instead of saying, like if I was going to say, talk about fasting, I wouldn't say fasting, right? Well, yeah, you were fasting the other day. I wouldn't do that, because what that does is it immediately takes you down a few pegs from a professionalism standpoint. Finish the word, fasting. This is so important when you're talking telehealth, because your personal the presence, like the energy, the atmosphere you carry around you, you don't have that sitting in front of the patient. Like, they don't understand that you might just be a big warm teddy bear, all right, and that you're just a goofy guy. They might not know that. All right, so what they look at is they hear you not finishing your sentences or your words and talking like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do the Minnesota accent here for you. If I was talking just a little bit, just a little, like snowed here the other day. For real, it did. 6 inches yesterday, and I thought, hey, time for winter to be over. Get out of this eternal winter. It's time to be done. Immediately, just listening to me talk, like shoot the breeze, in a Minnesota accent doesn't sound as professional as if you listen to me enunciating and finishing my words and continuing to use proper English, right? It's just a little different. Now, even in, like on the West Coast, you guys really got to be concerned about that. On the West Coast, it comes across. The East Coast, it's a lot more guttural. On the West Coast, they just don't finish words and everything kind of trails off. On the East Coast, it's a lot of this. Yeah. Oh, uh-huh. Like, it's a lot of noises that communicate. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that you limit those when you're doing telehealth, because not only does it change the one-way audio traffic that is often a situation with these platforms, but it's also distracting. And so instead of constantly laughing or giggling or making those guttural noises that say, yeah, I understand, right? Instead of doing that, what you want to do is you want to smile and nod. You want to have full sentences that say, yes, that makes sense, instead of, nah. You want to make sure that your communicating is a little bit more robust, your communication's a little bit more robust and longer, so that the audio platform can communicate it before the patient starts talking again. So just a couple of tricks that, if you use these platforms like Zoom or Get Healthy or OptiMantra, or if you're doing something over like a Google Hangouts situation, whatever it might be, make sure that you are continuing your conversation the way that it should be, rather than settling into what's comfortable and what's extremely natural for you. Now, again, if I'm talking to somebody that has a good old Minnesota accent like my family, I'm probably going to slip into that a little bit more frequently than I would otherwise. But it's important to make sure that your professionalism is being maintained, because you don't have your personal interaction, physical interaction, to overcome your lack of communication skills. You don't have it. And so I just want to make sure that you put that in the right spot. So anyway, when we talk about skills, the skills are, your personal skills for communication are magnified by these technology platforms. If you are more of a physical comedian instead of a verbal comedian, right? You're gonna struggle here. You're gonna struggle here, but that's all right. You just have to be able to translate your skills a little bit, okay? And that'll be important. So, anyway, this podcast has gone on long enough, I think, and so I'm gonna pause it here. Probably about 27 or 28 minutes, but we have just a quick review of what we talked about, right? Put your patients first. Patients got to choose themselves. Don't give them 99 reasons to get distracted. So set up your technical layout appropriately. Practice it. Set up your staging and the lighting and the stuff. Make sure that you're presentable. Right? Make sure that your skills translate as well. Your skills translate. So the translation of skills is like, that's a really important thing. Have you ever seen a good comedian on stage that's not funny at all in person? Have you ever seen, like, had a friend who's got to be one of the funniest people you've ever met, but they try to tell a story in front of a group and it just bombs every time? You want to make sure that that's not you when it comes to in-person versus telehealth. So practice. Lay out the skills. Make reminder notes for yourself. Get things organized. We'll see how we do. All right. Thank you guys for listening to the Nutrition Hero Podcast. Until next time, be well and be blessed.